I don't remember where I picked up this old chef's knife, but it's been sitting in the basement for a couple of years and I decided to restore it. I couldn't find any marking on it, so I don't know who made the knife, but it looks like an old French knife. And taking off these handle scales actually was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I just took my old chisel and hit it in there and it popped right off. I'm using my grinder with a fine wire wheel just to clean off the rust and see if I can see any markings or branding, but I couldn't see any. So the butt of the knife must have been hit by the previous owner because there was some damage to it. And you can see there's a little bend, so I'm just going to use my little anvil here and hammer it out as flat as I can get it. I use this tool tote here to carry my grinder and my sander. I made this tool tote as part of a video challenge put out by Scoutcrafter. This grinder works at a higher RPM and the brush is a stiffer brush, so I thought it would work better on the handle area, taking off some harder scale rust. Even though I got most of the rust off already, I thought I would use this Evapo-Rust just to get whatever was left. So I'm not sure what type of wood this is. I bought it in a lot at a yard sale. There was a box of wood, and this one had a nice look to it, and it was already about the same thickness, just a little thicker than these handle scales, so it was easy to work with, and it looks really nice. If you're a fan of Forged in Fire, the TV show on History Channel, you see them use a bandsaw to cut these handles out a lot. But it was actually pretty easy to use my little coping saw and cut them out. I'm using my Sargent number 4 plane here to thin down the handle scales, and here's a before and after shot. I just recently restored this. A belt sander or a belt grinder might be better for this job, but it was actually a lot of fun to use my hand plane to whittle these down and get them to a nice shape. So I let my knife soak overnight in the Evapo-Rust, and I pulled it out after about 24 hours. You can see how the Evapo-Rust gives the metal a darker color, but I'll clean that up with my wire brush again. This is my first time putting new handles on a knife, but you want to try and keep your drill bit straight, so that way when you put the pins in, it lines up on both sides of the handle. With a little luck, I was able to get these handle scales on correctly the first time. Check it out. A vise would have worked well for this part, but I used what I had, just a couple clamps, and clamped it down, and I used my grinder here with a sanding wheel to remove more material from these handles. After years of use and sharpening, this knife has developed some low and high spots. So I used my sanding wheel on the grinder again, just to give it one continuous cutting edge. I made sure to put my hand on the blade after grinding a little bit, just to make sure it didn't get too hot and ruin the temper. It was much easier for me to use my sanding wheel at this point to thin the blade down. This back area is kind of fat, and to thin it down with a sharpening stone would have taken me hours. I've never used epoxy like this, but I've watched Forged in Fire so many times that I am confident in my ability to get this done. Instead of using one solid piece of brass, I used a brass tube and then a solid brass pin inside of the tube, and I used my little anvil to peen it out. And this gives a good, strong mechanical hold along with the epoxy to keep these handle skills on. I cleaned as much of the epoxy as I could while it was still wet. That way it would make cleaning the cleanup afterwards easier. This handheld belt sander works great for getting the final fit of my handle. Now that I'm happy with the fit of the handle, I go back over it with sandpaper by hand and just round over the edges and smooth it out. I wanted to try and keep some of the patina on the knife, so I taped off the top half and then I polished the bottom. I used this whetstone here. It's a or a sharpening puck, and then I used another sharpening stone with some honing oil just to get it a little smoother. That's a finer stone. And then I used 4 different grits of sandpaper just to try and get a slightly mirror finish on there. I thought the contrast might look pretty neat, and I kind of liked the way it turned out. I just used this 1500 to polish up the patinaed part and left it at that. Sharpening a dull knife by hand is a pretty laborious process, and it takes a long time, so I just have a couple clips here of me sharpening it. I used my whetstone, and I used this little oil stone, and then I used my leather strop. The strop is a piece of leather that is glued to wood, and you put a little polishing compound, and that helps you get a really sharp edge on your knife. I used this 220 grit sandpaper to clean up the handle one last time before I put some shellac on it. I've never used shellac before, but Scoutcrafter, my favorite YouTuber, talks about it all the time, and I thought I'd give it a try. I really like the way it came out. Here you could see it before and after. I just wanted to see how it would look on one side of the handle compared to the other side without it. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. Now we have a nice sized knife for cutting our watermelons. Check it out. It goes right through the whole thing. Ay-ya! So we'll finish up with some before and after shots. I'm happy with the way this knife came out. It's long enough to go straight through that watermelon with ease. The shellac finish on the handle feels great, and it was nice to work with, as it doesn't really have any nasty smell to it. It's kind of a natural product. If you guys liked this video, please let me know below. It's my first knife restore, and if you guys have any tips or tricks for me in the future on my next knife project, I'd appreciate any information you guys have. Thank you.